Criminal justice is also useful in cybersecurity in terms of helping us to develop, research, and understand the cyber law. Generally speaking, law is a form of social control prescribing penalties for violations. And there's several different types of laws that are relevant. There's criminal law, civil law, and regulatory law that are especially relevant concepts when we think about cybercrime and cybersecurity. Criminal law, this is a branch of law that prescribes criminal punishment, and it's viewed as crimes against the state. Whereas civil law is concerned with violations against individuals, and these are viewed as crimes against individuals, and they would prescribe different penalties. If you hear of a lawsuit, for example, of someone suing someone, that would be an application of civil law. Now, criminal law entails situations where the state or federal government has developed criminal penalties for specific types of violations. Punishments in these cases would include prison or jail, probation, fine, community service, or other types of sanctions, restitution, for example. Now, the idea here is that the behavior was an offense against the state or an offense against the government. So let's say that someone steals from us through a cyber offense. They hack into our account and take our money. Or they commit fraud through a cyber offense. They sell us something that doesn't actually exist. Maybe we call the police investigate, federal law enforcement gets involved, they catch the individual, they prosecute the individual, and then the individual's punishment could be a deprivation of liberty through the form of prison or jail, or through probation or fine, restitution, and so on. Again, the example here would be that because the offense was an offense against the government initiates the action and prosecutes the offender. Whereas civil law prescribes monetary and injunctive penalties. If, for example, someone causes me harm through a cyber behavior, I could file a lawsuit against that individual or that business for the harm that I experienced because of their activity. Penalties would include, again, financial penalties or administrative penalties. A business might be told they have to cease and desist. An individual might be told they have to cease and desist in their particular behavior. But under civil law, people are not going to jail or prison for violating the civil law. In contrast, regulatory law prescribes regulations that are enforced by administrative bodies at state or federal levels. Penalties here would include primarily financial administrative penalties, things like cease and desist orders. So a regulatory court or regulatory body might send a letter, cease and desist letter or cease and desist order to an individual who's broken some sort of cyber regulatory law. Related to all of this, we can talk about cyber law in a general sense. Cyber law is a form of social control that regulates cyber technologies. Susan Brenner is one of the more prominent criminologists that's written about cyber law, and she has identified 4 areas where cyber law and criminal law intersect. First, she's written about hacking laws. And these are the laws that regulate against unauthorized access of a computer. States have their own hacking laws. The federal government has a hacking law. And there's many different varieties of hacking laws that govern and prescribe penalties that would be given to individuals who are caught engaging in these behaviors. These would be types of criminal laws because individuals could lose their liberty as a result of violating these particular laws. Federal malware laws make it illegal to intentionally damage with malicious malware or malicious software. And these malware laws would prescribe penalties that could be given to offenders who engage in behaviors that are designed to use malware maliciously. Cybercrimes against property laws. These are laws that would include and govern against theft, cyberbank theft, theft of trade secrets, and other types of laws. And the notion here is that they are designed to guard against fraud, to guard against embezzlement, to guard against internet crimes where people are stealing one another. And these cybercrimes against property laws would recommend penalties that would specifically target the property offense. In contrast, cybercrimes against person laws would include those laws that guard against cyber harassment, cyber stalking, and cyber threat laws, and those types of crimes that target an individual to hurt that individual physically or mentally, as opposed to financially, which would be the cybercrimes against property laws. So the intersection of the cyber law and criminal law occurs in cyberspace, but the application of these laws occurs in the courtroom, the criminal courtroom, that would be. Criminal justice and cybersecurity also intersect in as much as criminal justice programs and criminal justice courses can be involved in helping academic departments to seek national security agency designation. To receive a cyber operations designation, most will approach cybersecurity from an interdisciplinary perspective. And what departments will do is they'll bring in some sort of criminal justice thinking along with other disciplines in engineering and computer science in an effort to be designated as a cyber operations center of academic excellence. Now, this is significant because departments and cybersecurity programs that receive this designation are able to receive more federal funding in terms of scholarships, in terms of support that can be given to students from the National Science Foundation and from the Department of Homeland Security, and as well, it can give these individuals a leg up when they're seeking careers in cybersecurity. Certain topics that must be addressed, like Cyberlaw, can be addressed in criminal justice courses that are part of a cybersecurity program that's seeking this NSA designation. In Virginia right now, Virginia Tech is the only university that has a cyber operations designation. Old Dominion University is seeking it, and it's our hope here at ODU that we'll have that designation in the upcoming year or two. Now again, what this means is that we're able to provide a cyber operations type as education in a way that the National Security Agency has deemed as being particularly helpful for cyber operations careers. And as part of that, we do include our cyber law coursework to help to promote our notion of cyber operations meeting the standards of the Center for Academic Excellence. Criminal justice is also very helpful in conducting interdisciplinary research. And criminal justice researchers use a variety of strategies to conduct interdisciplinary cybercrime research. We mentioned surveys earlier in the prior mini-module, but we can go in a little more detail on how researchers have conducted different types of surveys to promote understanding about cybercrime. And criminal justice researchers have surveyed a number of different people in their efforts to study cybercrime. They've surveyed students to see what students think and know about cybercrime. Criminal justice researchers have also surveyed members of the public to see what members of the public know and think about cybercrime. We also spend some time surveying police officers and court officials and other individuals that work in criminal justice to see what they know and think about cybercrime. Because as a relatively newer topic, if we can understand how criminal justice professionals and other professionals view cybercrime and cybersecurity, we can better understand what we need to do to help to prepare them for responding to cybercrime. So surveys are probably the mainstay of criminal justice research. Most of our studies have some form of survey attached to them, and they could be, in the past, they were mostly mail surveys or telephone surveys or face-to-face surveys or interviews, but what we are seeing more and more are these internet surveys or email surveys, particularly in the area of identifying demand for job demand and workplace demand, and how we as professionals or educators can better meet that demand. You'll see a number of surveys being conducted there as well. There's also research that criminologists do that focus on the analysis of existing records and looking at data records that exist, for example, with the Internet Crime Complaint Center or with police departments or other types of agencies that have records that might be of use. Particularly becoming more popular, though, is the use of web forums. And Tom Holt and some others have done a number of studies at Michigan State and his collaborators all across the U.S., where they've gone into web forums and they've studied the patterns of behavior and the patterns of communication in these web forums to help make sense of the types of communication strategies, the types of behaviors that cyber offenders engage in, as well as the things that put individuals at risk. There have also been researchers that have engaged in different types of field research in terms of some researchers have gone to DEF CON and have gone to hacker conferences and interviewed hackers and studied hackers at these conferences. Now, field research is a little bit harder with hackers than it might be with other types of offenders, because hackers are notorious for hiding their identity, whereas some criminologists have gone and, believe it or not, hung out with gang members or other types of violent offenders to learn from them. It's harder to get in with a group of hackers. However, criminologists have done it through again, going to hacker conferences or even joining web forums online and interacting with hackers through an online environment. Criminologists also have done experiments in cybercrime. I mentioned David Maimon's research earlier, where some researchers will set up what are known as honeypots, and in these honeypots they'll do things to see how cyber offenders behave in these honeypots. They'll change the mechanisms by which the honeypots operate and by which threats and warnings appear in a particular cyberspace, and then changing those mechanisms, sit back and see how offenders behave. That is indeed an experiment. Now, experiments are seen as the gold standard in research. They're more difficult to conduct in cybercrime. Some criticisms that come out is that they're artificial, they're not truly real, and that they don't truly get into the actual offender mindset. But still, experiments can be helpful in helping us to figure out how cyber criminals behave in certain environments. Now, as I mentioned earlier, studies of students are increasingly common and can be beneficial. They're particularly popular in psychology, but criminology and criminal justice are becoming more and more involved in using students as research subjects, because we can learn quite a bit. But the bottom line is that when we talk about criminal justice and research and cybercrime and interdisciplinary research, there are many opportunities where criminal justice researchers can work more closely with researchers from computer science, from engineering, from information technology, business, philosophy, and so on, to help to create this interdisciplinary knowledge in this interdisciplinary field of cybersecurity. One of my highlights a few years ago was when one of our engineers at Old Dominion University emailed a philosopher and CC'd me on the email. And the engineer said, I really want to do this study and this project, but I need a philosopher and a criminal justice researcher to help with this study. Will you guys work with me on this particular project? And indeed, when we think about cybersecurity and the interdisciplinary nature of cybersecurity, some of the best studies will be these efforts that bring together criminal justice researchers, criminologists, psychologists, philosophers, engineers, computer science, IT specialists, who are able to study cybersecurity through this interdisciplinary lens.